Hey dudes, today I want to talk about something a little bit different. Today I want to talk about the color pie and discuss some of the cards that strain the concept of the color pie a little bit from alpha, at least in my opinion. I really love the color pie because I think it gives the game a sense of purpose and some level of categorization that a lot of those of us that play probably find appealing, and it's great for balance and keeping the colors distinct and unique. That being said, most of this is pretty nebulous, and I believe you can pretty much justify doing anything in any color if you try hard enough. And we've seen that play out throughout the years as the color pie has changed. But like I said, we're mainly focusing on alpha and my personal opinion on this. I'm not here to tell you what should or shouldn't be allowed for each color, and I'm not here to tell you that your interpretation is wrong or mine is correct. I just kind of want to talk about the cards from Alpha that are a little bit strange by a more modern understanding of the game. And the first card I want to talk about is Karma. Karma is an enchantment that deals a damage to you for each swamp you have in play during your upkeep. This affects both players, and the usual strategy is just to not play swamps and then to use this against someone who is playing swamps. But if you want to be really funny, you can use Karma with Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and a Circle of Protection white to deal significant damage to each player during their upkeep in a game of Commander. That's pretty funny. You can even do this in mono white, by the way, because Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth is colorless and doesn't say it can tap for black mana, even though it can, because when it comes into play, it becomes a swamp. It's not technically a swamp until it comes into play. That's pretty funny stuff right there. Now, Karma is a pretty interesting card. It is a pretty strong card in the right circumstances, and it definitely feels like a white card, at least to me. Dealing damage isn't usually something white does, but they were a little bit more nebulous with this in the early days. And I guess the card does feel a little mechanically suspect these days, but I don't think I would personally call this like an out of color card. But to be honest, like there aren't any white cards, in my opinion, that actually like break the color pie. There's two cards I could pretty much justify talking about at all, and that was Karma and then Resurrection. Resurrection is another card that looks and feels like a white card, and white even does have some level of reanimation stuff. Usually, when white gets reanimation these days, often it's only creatures that had died this turn, or it's artifacts or enchantments. But it's really interesting because as the card pool has grown, Resurrection feels more like Reanimator, or like many of the black style bring a card back from the graveyard, and it doesn't really feel like the white ones, even though in Alpha it is quite mechanically distinct from the only other reanimation card is Animate Dead, which Animate Dead is cheaper, but it can be blown up, which takes the creature away, and it lowers their power by one. So in Alpha, they are mechanically unique in quite a few ways, which I think is just kind of interesting. That as the card pool has grown, the resurrection effect has kind of moved more towards black, but it makes a lot of sense in Alpha. Personally, I like Resurrection. I think it's a sweet card, and I'm not sure I'll ever be mature enough to not find this art a little bit suspect. But it's another one I wouldn't really call a color pie break. And from a flavor standpoint, I find it justifiable, but by today's standards, it is kind of a strange card. All right, and then let's talk about Blue and Red Elemental Blast, two cards that I love a lot. But these are a blue and a red card that say counter target spell or destroy target permanent. Red and blue are not usually given the opportunity to remove a permanent of any kind, and technically they aren't here either because it's restricted to their enemy color, but it is in the same set as the Laces. So these cards can technically blow up every permanent in the set, including lands. But that is a lot of hoops to jump through. It's not very good, but it is really funny, in my opinion. Personally, I really like these cards. And I think the color pie is actually more rich and interesting when each card can really fuck with their enemy colors. But I get why the game hasn't gone in that direction. It can really fuck with monocolor decks, and color hate just doesn't often play well. Like, this kind of stuff is a great idea when you intend for everyone to have like 3 or 4 color random piles of crap, but once people figure out the game, these kind of cards just don't generally do much. No, I mean, Red Elemental Blast can do a lot in the right Eternal formats, just because of how fucking good blue is, but barring that, the color hate kind of generally doesn't do too much. I guess I should also mention Life Force and Death Grip here. These are the green and black ones, and they are repeatable enchantments that just counter a spell of the opposite color. These are really funny and almost never do anything, but when they do something, someone is usually locked out of the game. Not great, not great, but pretty cool idea. Um, I think probably, other than maybe you could argue the relaxing a little bit on like color hate and color changing effects, the biggest change between modern Magic and early Magic is blue direct damage. Prodigal Sorcerer and Pirate Ship are 2 blue creatures that can tap to deal a damage to any target. These cards are really cool, decently strong, and really fuck with your blocker's math if you aren't careful. They are also just really cool. I really love the flavor of Pirate Ship. It's just kind of shooting at you from the sea, which is funny to me. There's also Psychic Venom, a very cool card that kind of sucks in limited, but is really, really strong if you guys are playing relatively hyper-tuned decks and with tight mana bases. 2 damage every time you tap a land against burn is like super scary if you are playing this in like a blue-red burn deck. Speaking of burn, there's also Psionic Blast, which can remove a creature, a planeswalker, a player, or yeah, just deal damage. It's a very, very cool card, but I don't think that they make too many blue cards that say deal 4 damage to anything these days. There's actually a lot of damage in the blue cards in Alpha, which is definitely very interesting by today's standards. But yeah, other than the direct damage in blue, there really isn't too much more that's pretty strange. I guess maybe Siren's Call, you could argue, is more of a red effect, or possibly a green effect. So that one is maybe a little suspect, but Siren's Call is a pretty good card. Can't tell you the number of times I've been fucked over by one of those. But yeah, blue is probably the color that is most like changed from when the game originally set up, but you know, that makes sense. The blue cards were fucking sick and nothing else was anywhere near as good, although the black cards are pretty good too. Interestingly, with the black cards, when I was looking through them trying to come up with this idea for the video, the only card that stuck out to me is a color hate card. Gloom is a pretty rough card to play through if you've never had the pleasure. It used to say that white spells cost 3 more mana and Circle of Protections cost 3 more mana to use, but now it affects the activated abilities of all white enchantments. So now it fucks on Blessing. Oh no. Taxing isn't really much of a black thing, at least not in that I've ever seen, but like all of the alpha breaks or bends, you can't really argue that the flavor isn't there. This card sucks to play against, but I guess I don't have too much else to say about it here. It's kind of a strange black card. I wouldn't necessarily call it a super bend and break. I guess the interesting thing is, especially in Alpha, most of the cards that you would look at as being kind of breaks or bends are color hate cards. And it was part of the whole idea to like really get into your head the difference between your ally colors and your enemy colors. A concept that I wish they played around with more these days. But yeah, that's Gloom. Red is kind of an interesting one because you can point to its like non-dragon flyers as a break. I'm not going to. I think it's fine that red has big birds occasionally. You could also maybe consider false orders a break, but if I'm being honest, I'm not reading this card again, so I have no idea if that's true or not. I will point to Smoke, though, as being something kind of strange for red. Smoke prevents you from untapping more than one creature during your untap. This card is pretty cool, but it's always felt a little off to me from a color pie standpoint. I do really, really like red stacks pieces, though. They tickle a part in my brain that's, I don't know, primal. I like it, though. I guess you could also look at Two-Headed Giant of Fories as a bit strange. It's full of flavor, and I wouldn't call it a card that shouldn't be read, but It's not very often that a red creature can block two creatures. Wheel of Fortune is probably the biggest break in red, though. At least they don't very often make red cards that say, hey, draw 7 cards. Which is a shame because fuck do I love drawing 7 cards. Print more. Red is, there's definitely stuff you can poke at and be like, yeah, this is a little bit strange. But I don't know. I guess we could look at, there is, what is it, Phantasmal Monster and Rock of Kerr Ridge. These are basically the same card, except one is blue, one is red, and you can be like, well, it doesn't really make sense that red gets this as often as blue, but that's also not actually true. The red one is a rare, and the blue one is an uncommon. So even when they did stuff like that, I think it's actually helping to kind of express what they were trying to express at the time. And like I said, a lot of people don't like flyers in all of the colors, but all the colors get flyers. I don't think it's that big of a deal personally. But let's move on to green. Green is actually pretty well defined in alpha. If you really want to point at something, Channel is probably the least green feeling card. It's a sorcery that lets you trade 1 life for a mana, and then you can do that as often as you want. Making lots of mana is a pretty green effect, but it's usually tied to lands or mana dorks, and paying life to do something doesn't really feel green. And looking at alpha as a whole, I'm kind of surprised Channel isn't the black card. It is a pretty good card, though. I guess you could also point to the land destruction in green, as in Ice Storm and Kudzu. Green doesn't usually blow up lands since it's the color of nature and all of that. But both of these are pretty flavorful in their own way, and Kudzu is kind of fun to play around with that once in a while if you've never done it. I guess you could also say maybe Hurricane is a bit of a bend, but I think it's fine and totally cool that green deals damage to flyers. But yeah, I guess, I don't know, I've just always found discussions on the color pie to be very interesting. The color pie is very necessary to the functionality of the game, or at least is necessary to the feel of this game versus different games that don't have such a system, right? Like you don't need the color pie system to make a good game, but Magic is a great game in part because of the color system. It's also such a deep topic, and the spaces between the colors are very open to interpretation. Yeah, I don't know. I've never really been super bothered by what certain people perceive to be as breaks or bends, but if every color did everything the same, then there would be no point to having the colors at all. So I do think that there is some level of importance here. But I also think a lot of people get way fucking bent out of shape about this stuff. But I am interested to hear your thoughts on the color pie and which of these cards you think are or are not breaks. Also, let me know what you think of this kind of video. I might do more things where I just kind of pick a weird topic and talk about some of the sets in a different way that doesn't take fucking 7 hours and isn't just a brief of the set. Yeah, I don't know. I've been trying to do something new. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Otherwise, you can like the video if you liked it. You can subscribe if you give a shit. But either way, I hope you have a magical day. Thank you for watching.